My privilege to introduce our speaker this morning, Mark Asanovich. Mark started his career at the Ohio State University as a graduate assistant in their strength program. He became an assistant strength coach there, and then Mark went to the Citadel for a year, and after the Citadel, he landed at Anoka High School. He was Anoka High School strength coach for 9 years, and then joined the Minnesota Vikings as an assistant strength coach. When Tony Dungy got the head coaching job with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Mark became the head strength coach for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, a position that he held for 6 years. He then went to the Baltimore Ravens for a couple, and then he ended up as the Jacksonville Jaguars strength coach under Jack Del Rio for, Mark, how many years? 7 more years. So Mark's been in the NFL as a strength coach for 14 years. But beyond all that, I'll tell you what, I've known Mark since about 1990, 1989, and he's an unbelievable guy. He's a true professional. He really cares about the athletes, and I know he cares about you guys deeply, and he and Coach Carlson are going to work together in our strength program. Mark is going to be run all the strength training courses here during the school day and build that program, and he's going to work with all the sports here. So we are blessed, we are grateful to have Mark leading along with Coach Carlson our strength program. So I've asked Mark to share some words this morning. At about 10:02 or so, we can have some questions. There may be some questions about the direction we're going, strength training, whatever. Feel free to ask those. So let's give Mark 3. Ready?
Good morning. Thank you, Coach. I would have been just as proud and happy being introduced as Coach Carlson's assistant this morning. I want to first thank Coach Nelson for giving me an invitation to stand up before the Minnetonka football family, and I'm humbled and I'm honored by the opportunity. In doing my research for my talk this morning, I found it interesting that the word character derives from the Greek word herdikis. And back in ancient Greece, herdikis was your seal. It was your mark. And back then, that was a big deal because your seal was your identifying mark. So that's like your character. Your character is your identifying mark. It's who you are. Now, in my opinion, I think the development of character is more caught than it is taught. Meaning, the people who leave their stamp on your life probably have more an effect on your character than somebody standing up and teaching it to you. So today, if you'll bear with me, I'm going to not take credit, but I'm going to give credit to 3 individuals that made a mark on my life. The first individual is my father. My father's name was Asanovich. He was born in the former Yugoslavia, a little village called Zitnich. And he grew up being raised by his mother because 3 months after he was born, my grandfather died. Life was hard, but life was happy. When I visited Zitnich in 1974, there was only one home that had indoor plumbing. When World War II started, he joined a Serbian underground fighting unit called the Chetniks. So in World War II, he not only fought against the Nazis, he fought against the communists. And at the end of the war, because of the Yalta agreements, Yugoslavia was given to the communists. So he didn't have a home anymore. And that's when he came to the United States. And I was grateful he did, because he instilled in me faith, he instilled family, and he instilled country. And he always told me, you never listen to the culture. Because as men, the culture gives us mixed messages. It tells us that we derive our value based on our brawn, the bed, and our billfolds. Now, as far as brawn goes, generally the culture tells us that we take our value by the number of home runs we hit, the number of tackles we make, the number of runs we score. My dad taught me that the strength of a man, a strong man, lifts the weak. He gets under his family and his friends, and he lifts them up through their life. In regards to the bed, many times we receive the message that we get our value by how many women we sleep with. My dad taught me that a real man isn't one who has the ability to make babies. It's the one who can raise babies and love their mom. As far as the billfold, the culture teaches us that we derive our value by the size of our bank account, or the size of the car you drive, or the size of the house you live in. My dad taught me that. He did teach me the value of money. But he also taught me that the deposits that you make in your children and in your teammates and in your community, those are eternal. My dad stamped into my life a legacy that I can only hope to pass on to my children. Another individual that had an indelible stamp on my life was Woody Hayes. Now, some of you may have heard that name, but I know most of the players probably don't. Coach Woody Hayes was a famous and legendary coach at Ohio State. As a kid growing up in Duluth, Minnesota in the mid-'70s, I was always a college football fan. Still am. But the Gophers made it real hard to be a Gopher fan. And as a young kid, you're always looking for somebody who's winning. And a lot of the teams back then were the same winning teams. Now, there was the Michigans, there were the Ohio States, there were the Alabamas, the USCs, even Clemson was successful back then. But I always found myself drawn to the spirited coach on the sidelines for Ohio State, so I became a Buckeye. So in 1994, when I was granted a graduate assistant position in the Buckeye strength and conditioning staff, it was for me a dream come true. Now, at that time, Coach Hayes had been relieved of his head coaching duties, but he was still very much a part of the football program. They used him heavily in recruiting. And being a military historian, he also taught a lot of classes in their ROTC program. So when I arrived on campus in July of 1984, the first stop I made was to the third floor of the ROTC building. That was Coach Hayes' office. And I walked in the office and I saw Coach Hayes working at his desk. And I introduced myself to his secretary and I told him that I was going to be part of the Buckeye football program and I wanted to introduce myself to Coach Hayes. And I think he overheard me because he waved me and he said, "Come on in and sit down, Mark." And that was the first of many sit-downs I had with him in my 2 years at Ohio State. And I'll never forget the first meeting that I had because he taught me things like, you don't coach X's and O's. You coach people. And players, they don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And he emphasized to me that stuff like that can't be manufactured. You can't be made up, because players can smell a fake a mile away. And he also taught me that love wasn't telling players all the time what they want to hear. It's telling them what they need to hear. Over those 2 years, we had many meetings, but I think it was the last meeting I had with him prior to leaving for the Citadel that was the most significant. My agenda was to go into that meeting and tell him how important he was to my life, and tell him how important his mentoring was to my coaching. Of course, he had a different agenda. His agenda was to teach me that you can never pay back. Meaning, those people that help you in your walk in life up the ladder, you can't pay those people back. So what you have to do is, he said, you got to pay forward. And he explained that paying forward means that to honor those that helped you, you have to turn around and help the other people now coming up. Coach Hayes stamped into my life loyalty, work ethic, and honor. The third individual that had an indelible stamp on my life was Tony Dungy. I first met Tony in 1991 at the Vikings minicamp. I was a volunteer strength assistant. He was the defensive coordinator. And even though we had vastly different positions, he made me feel like part of the coaching staff. Unlike a lot of defensive coordinators in the league, Tony went out of his way to make you feel part of the team. When he was hired in Tampa, he had his secretary give me a call and ask me about my interest in the strength and conditioning job, to which I was very interested, obviously. So we made flight arrangements to go down to the interview the next day, to what I thought was going to be the interview. So I put on my suit and tie, get on the plane, and on the plane I'm studying some notes, reviewing some answers to some questions I think they're probably going to ask in the interview. Now, this was before 9/11. So at that time, you could take people out to the gate, or you can pick people right up at their gate. They didn't have any security checks. When I walked off the plane, standing there waiting for me was Tony Dungy. Now, he could easily have sent a secretary or a scout to pick me up, like most head coaches do. That's not Tony. So when we got in the car, I was still a little bit nervous about this upcoming interview. So I asked him, I said, "What's the agenda for today, Tony?" And he said, "Well, the first thing we got to do is get you in to sign your contract with Rich McKay. Then you got to get in the weight room and put together your equipment list so we can be ready to go in the off season." And so started my career in the NFL. I could tell you many stories that happened over those 6 years in Tampa, but the biggest stamps that were made in my life had nothing to do with football. Two significant incidences happened in my life when I was coaching in Tampa. My father died, and the birth of my first daughter, Haley. Now, the general rule in the NFL when something like that happens in the off season is you have 1 day to mourn and 1 day to celebrate. During the season, you probably don't even have that. Both these incidences occurred during the season, and in both cases, Tony took me aside and said, there are things far more important than the game of football. These things, a death of a father and a birth of a child, only happen once in your life. So you have to make it right. So you go and you take care of your mom. When my child was born, you go home and you take care of your wife. And when you've done what you need to do, then you come back to the team. Tony Dungy stamped into my life honor, integrity, work ethic, accountability. Now, there were a lot of people that made stamps in my life, but those were the three big ones for me. I really believe that character isn't developed in your life by chance. It's developed by choice. And as a strength and conditioning coach, Coach Carlson and I would tell you that to get stronger, you have to work extremely hard. You got to eat right. You got to sleep right. But to build character, you got to live right. You got to open your eyes. You've got to learn from those people that are making stamps in your life. So in closing today, just let me say this. I challenge you, choose to be men of character. Choose to be a team of character, being a team of character by standing shoulder to shoulder, in building each other up, in building your family up, and in building your school and community up. So have a good day today, have a good practice, and leave a mark on somebody's life today. Thank you.
We got a couple quick questions for Coach.
Okay, I read once where Coach Hayes down at Ohio State used to go pick the kids up in his pickup truck when he was recruiting. They get off the bus, and he'd go down and get 3 or 4 of them in the pickup truck. And if he got 4 of them, the ones that were left when they got back to the stadium were the ones he kept. Is that true?
I don't know about that. There's a lot of stories about him. I think if you want to know Woody Hayes, I'll give you one story. Art Schleister was one of his top quarterbacks, and I think he's like number 6 on the all-time chart of quarterbacks at Ohio State, statistics-wise. He was drafted in the first round by the Baltimore Colts at that time. And in his 3rd year, Art was addicted to gambling. And he was like $70,000 in the hole to his creditors. So he went to the FBI, made a deal with the FBI that he would work with them, breaking up this gambling ring and everything like that. When Coach Hayes heard about this for the first time over the news, he was listening over the radio. He was in the equipment room at Ohio State. He got on the phone, and these were dial phones at the time. He dialed Art Schleister's number by heart. He knew Schleister's number. Schleister answers the phone, and he says, "Art, this is Coach Hayes. I want you to know a couple of things." He says, "I want you to know how ashamed of you I am for the disgrace you've caused this university, the disgrace you've caused your teammates, and the disgrace you've brought to me." And there's this long pause. And then he says, "But Art, I love you for standing up and being a man." That was Coach Hayes.
Let's follow up about Coach Hayes. Obviously, we did go out where he wanted to with what happened in that bowl game. How did he deal with that and still be intact?
What he's talking about is in the Gator Bowl, his last season, he was extremely competitive. And the Buckeyes were losing to Clemson. And in the waning moments, a defensive back named Charlie Bauman intercepted a pass and ran into the Ohio sideline. And Coach Hayes gave him a roundhouse, belted him in the side of his helmet. And so in talking to Coach Hayes about that, what he told me was he probably should have retired 2 years prior to that. He admitted he had made a mistake. The thing about that is that that's what he's known for now. You know, you don't hear about the many times he went to Children's Hospital or the scholarships in his name and stuff like that. But a lot of people don't know this, that the Hayeses and the Baumans became very close friends. And Charlie Bauman, who was belted by Coach Hayes, even today says that he would never have been famous if it wasn't for Coach Hayes hitting him.
How about, got time for one more?
What differences are you looking to make in the Smith program?
Oh, I tell you what, I am extremely honored to be here. I'm not looking to make any changes. The thing I hope to add is just reinforce what Coach Carlson has already taught. I mean, we have all the tools here. I've told you before that I've been to over 200 high schools over the last year and a half. And what we have at Minnetonka, I joke with my colleagues, I'll tell them I've been hired by the University of Minnetonka. We have all the tools, we have all the coaching. We just have to make it happen.
Thank you, Mark.
You bet.